Welcome back, everyone, to Unclassified number 15. We've been doing this now forever. And today we have a lot on our plate, but the most important question of them all, are we so back, Preston? Last week, we were joining the axis of evil. We were teaming up with the bad guys. But now, I don't know. Are we so back?
I like the optimism. I'm not as confident. I think it's been interesting, though, because we've actually had some interactions between key leaders around the world and President Trump and senior U.S. officials, and it's gone very differently this week, I would say. I'm sure we're going to get into some of that, but based off the comments I'm seeing from our friends across the Atlantic, I wouldn't quite say that we're back. Not quite yet.
This is disappointing. Me, I am ride or die on the Trump coaster. All right, when things are going great, I'm optimism. When things are bad, it's doom and gloom. And I think that goes for the rest of the news media. But to get us started here, Preston, I have a theory I want to pitch to you here. We need a good heel leader in this world. So the last heel leader, and a heel is a villain who is just committed to being a villain no matter what. And I think the key to being a good heel leader, and we're going to get into like real things after this, but I think the key to being a good heel leader is that you have to be not only just like a truly despicable individual, but you also have to have this charisma and pomp and show to you that, you know, kind of gives an effect around it. And so an example of that would be Saddam Hussein. I don't really think leaders like Hitler or like Stalin really qualify in this because they were evil. I guess Stalin had the cult of personality, but no one really had this great heel ability as Saddam Hussein. And my belief that in this is that after 9/11 happened, he releases the statement. It's like, yeah, the U.S. deserved it. That's just being a villain for the sake of it. And so we don't have any more of those anymore, and we do need one. And unfortunately, it seems like the only person who's capable of having the show part is our current president, although he's not despicably evil, at least not yet. So that's unfortunate for us. But what do you think? Do you think we need a good heel leader to unite the world?
We don't have one? I mean, I feel like Putin's up there, right?
Yeah, but he doesn't have the show around it. Like, Saddam was making a show out of just being the bad guy. He liked being the bad guy. Putin's just like, okay, well, I'm the victim. I mean, I guess Saddam also
very victim-oriented. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, so is your argument that the U.S. is now the heel? We've got
my argument is that, unfortunately for us, the only leader on the world stage is because there are a lot of bad hombres. A lot of bad guys, a lot of bad leaders, a lot of just dudes you would not want babysitting your kids, not want in your house, not to be your leader. But none of them have the pomp and show. And so I think it's on us to make sure Donald Trump stays a good guy because we could be dealing with like new Saddam here. Anyways, on the things that matter, okay, is we're so back. So Trump, you know, he has Macron come to the White House. And I want to ask, did you watch the press conference or their greeting at all, Preston?
I didn't see the greeting. I saw the interaction in the Oval.
Yeah, what is going on with these two? They can't keep their hands off each other. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, they shake hands for 30 seconds. They're hugging each other. They're putting each other's hands on each other's knees. Pretty bizarre. But what, you know, this meeting, though, with Macron and Trump was exhilarating. What were your reactions?
Do you ever have any? I hate that, by the way, when somebody shakes your hand. Like, the handshake it's quick, right? In, out, move on. The holding the hand and talking, I hate that so much. It feels, I don't know. Every time it makes me uncomfortable. And I just want to move on. We can keep talking. We just don't need to be holding hands for the duration. But either way, the Macron one was interesting because he came across. Look, I liked his approach. I feel like we've seen a lot of leaders come into the Oval Office, especially under Trump. Under Biden, it was all just very, like, blah across the board, I would say. Like, when they go to move to those press conferences, nothing is coming out of that. It is just the most boring, scripted, like, don't even need to cover it, right? Usually not even questions of the media after the fact. I do like with Macron and now with Trump, it's a little bit off script at times. So Trump started going down the United States isn't getting any of our money back, but Europe, this is a loan and they're getting repaid. And Macron stepped in and said, well, actually, no, that is not correct, and corrected Trump on that, which is good. That's one of the things in this whole Ukraine saga that's been frustrating, where some of this stuff, or that we've sent $350 billion to Ukraine, or whatever number it is this week. That stuff is so frustrating to me because it's easily, like, we know that that's not accurate, but it continues to get repeated, and people hear it enough that they just kind of take it as fact. So I kind of like that Macron stepped in and said, actually, let me set the record straight here.
Without a doubt. And it seemed like it went quite well. What was interesting to me is that Macron calls Trump Donald, and that is not something, I mean, Starmer did not call him Donald. He called him the president. He called him Trump. That's, like, bizarre, right? Like, I mean,
condescending.
I don't even know if it's condescending. It's maybe it's very French, because Macron never called Biden Joe. You know,
he didn't.
No, he never called Obama Barack. At least as far as I know. So
I mean, it is something that Trump brings on himself, because he does that, right? Like, he'll refer to world leaders by their first name, and I think at times it's kind of viewed in a condescending manner.
Oh, you're right. Trump does call him Emmanuel. Yeah.
I don't know if he does it with all of the foreign leaders, but like when he would refer to Clinton, it was always Hillary. When he referred to Biden, it was always Joe. And maybe condescending is not the right way to say it, but there is something to that. And I don't know, it just feels like Macron's doing the same thing back.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's why their handshakes are weird too, because Trump does the pull thing, but I also think Macron does the pull thing. So they're just sitting there rocking
infinite
back and
loop,
forth.
man.
Infinite loop.
Never ends.
But did any news come out of the Macron-Trump press conference? I'm trying to jog my memory, but it feels like maybe 19 years ago. So,
yeah, it was 18 years ago, so not quite as long ago as you think. Nothing major that I recall. We're hearing a lot of the same things over and over again. I believe in that press conference they talked about no U.S. troops being on the ground in Ukraine for any sort of peacekeeping mission, but that Putin was on board with European peacekeeping troops. I think that might have been one of the things that came out of this. For what it's worth, that is still very much up in the air. The U.S. has been very consistent from the beginning of this war that U.S. troops will not be on the ground in any capacity. And now I should caveat that with, we do have troops like in and around the Capitol helping with the movement and the accountability of weapons and aid going in, with the embassy, things like that, but nothing in terms of in the East or the South in any fighting capacity. Secretary Hegseth has hammered that recently, just not leaving any doubt for no, there will not be U.S. troops. And even when it comes to the peacekeeping mission, when and if this war is drawn to a close, it does seem like that is a hard line that the U.S. has laid out a long time ago and is continuing to hold. So I think we heard that again from Trump. It wouldn't be anything new, but I think it's notable that is a line they're not wavering on.
without a doubt. And then 3 days later, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, comes to the United States, and I mean, Trump is an Anglophile. His mom is from Scotland. She grew up speaking Gaelic. English was her second language. He loves the royal family. I don't know have you watched Art of the Surge, the documentary on Trump?
No.
So they have a multi-piece documentary. It's not very good. I mean, there are definitely parts in it where you're like, okay, this is interesting. But other parts is just like right-wing Twitter.
Art of the Surge? S-U-R-G-E?
Yeah, or maybe it's the Surge, the Donald Trump comeback, or it's something like that. I don't know. But in it, he, the episode I was watching recently, he flips through a picture book he's selling, where it shows all his photos with other world leaders, and he really, truly gushing over King Charles and Queen Elizabeth and Camilla and how nice they were, how good of a relationship they have. I mean, he does this with everyone, but, it felt notable, especially because mom's from Scotland. So Trump, very excited to see Starmer, and Starmer must have, like, magic powers because all of a sudden, and Trump says he doesn't remember calling Zelensky a dictator. He says he can't believe he said that. And then he says that he's going to help Ukraine get their territory back from Russia. And then he also says that he'll back British peacekeepers in Ukraine if Russia attacks them. And he also at one point says he's open to U.S. soldiers being peacekeepers in Ukraine. And then he has this new mineral deal that like is not like a shakedown. It's like helping Ukraine. I don't know what happened in there. I know the king, gave him this handwritten letter inviting him to come back, and Starmer really lays it on thick. He's like, it's such a historic victory, or not victory, such a historic event. The second world state visit of anyone ever come. We're so happy to have. I mean, it's going to be historic, truly one of a kind. I mean, you watched. It was really laying it on thick, and Trump loved it. And it seems as though Keir Starmer, this stuffy, buttoned-up British prime minister, may be the Trump whisperer. Or my theory is actually maybe it's not Starmer that's the Trump whisperer. I think it's King Charles. So, thoughts?
This is the type of stuff that makes me nervous with this administration, specifically Trump, I think is worth saying. The back and forth. Again, no issue with anybody ever changing their mind or changing their position on something, but the pace at which these changes are happening is hard to keep up with. And there are things that you cannot change your mind on very easily, right? Like I can change my mind on the topic for a video I'm going to put out tomorrow. No problem at all. Maybe I was going to talk about Ukraine and I decided to talk about Israel. Then I just switch it up at the last minute. That's okay. No harm done. But when you're talking about whether or not we're going to help Ukraine take back some of their territory, you can't just walk that back and change your mind the next day. Or you can. But there's real, at some point you get to a place where actions are happening, very, very real actions with real consequences. That's what makes me nervous, is Trump has said some things that I don't think would be good for the United States foreign policy and national security. He said other things that I think will be good. And for the life of me, I don't know the direction that it's actually headed.
Yeah, no, I mean, it has been fun to watch, though, on Twitter and TikTok.
Twitter's been a mess, man.
Because there are a lot of people who just back him on everything he says, and they changed their opinions to be in line with him. So, you have these people who... I mean, it's very odd Trump changes his opinion every 45 seconds, but it's even weirder to see an entire influencer industry change their opinions every 45 seconds to match his. But, yeah, I don't know. I guess this is what happens when you just don't... I don't want to say he doesn't care, but, like, I don't know. Does Trump truly have an ideological view on this war happening in Ukraine? I don't know. But he did say Ukrainians are very brave. They're very good fighters. And now today he's meeting Zelensky at noon, our time, 1 p.m. Eastern. They are having a joint press conference, and that will be must watch. I can only imagine what will be said, but that is very exciting stuff. So to you're very worried about this. You think this new Trump being the Lion of Kharkiv, as we called him a few episodes ago, you think it's all fake, or maybe it'll change? You think he'll revert to his previous behavior when he meets Putin, whenever that is?
I just don't think that anything around this war is grounded in a driving principle that is easy to understand. So, like the saying that I want the fighting to stop, I want the killing to stop, you can say that about any conflict throughout history. It's a good thing. Fewer people dying is good. Let's resolve those differences without more people dying. I think across the board, that's a pretty safe statement to make. And that's generally where he's been for a long time. I want the fighting to stop. I want the killing to stop. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of what this looks like, it's just been all over the map. And I'm watching people... they want so desperately to see good news or bad news, depending on how they feel about this conflict. I guess it'd be good news no matter what, depending on what side they fall on. But you just can't, because he'll say something, and then the next day, to your point, he doesn't remember or is just kind of joking that he called Zelensky a dictator, right? So it's very hard at this point to make any strong conclusions as to where this is headed. I do think the press conference today will be big. It's notable that he's meeting with Zelensky, talking with Zelensky. Zelensky I think, is underappreciated here in the United States because he's been hyped up as a con man, criminal, low grade politician, dictator of sorts. And I think that image of him has been presented so long, especially to like the hardcore Trump supporters. I don't want to say like across everybody in the United States, but definitely to the folks that are exclusively getting their news maybe from what we would consider some further right outlets. And I think they're probably not understanding that Zelensky is actually like a pretty effective politician, and he knows how to. I mean, we saw when Trump started to lead in the polls, Zelensky changed up the language about why the United States should continue to support Ukraine. He changed it immediately from, fighting for democracy to started talking about minerals, right? And future deposits and the strength of the United States. So he's smart. I think he knows how to navigate this, and it'll be interesting to see how he does it. Doesn't mean it'll be effective or it'll get anything done, but I do think there's a segment of our population that thinks he is just a complete idiot and have not been able to see kind of he's navigated this war pretty well, all things considered.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Now let me ask you this. One of the big gripes of the right very early on was that Zelensky would not wear a suit. He wore I don't know, the war thing and
combat shirt kind of thing.
Yeah, the combat shirt. Do you think he'll wear the combat shirt again today, or do you think he wears a suit? Come think about it, I haven't seen Zelensky in a suit ever, I think.
Yeah, I don't think he'll put a suit on for Trump. Musk cleared the road for that, right? Musk is wearing a T-shirt and ball cap in the Oval, so there's no issue dressing down.
Yeah, Musk, that guy. Did you see he joked about accidentally turning off Ebola stuff? That's
crazy. I think we all know somebody like that where the sense of humor is just off, is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And like they expect laughs at times where laughs were never going to happen, and that was one of those where it's like, bro, read the room. That was not a funny thing.
Without a doubt.
Very, very uncomfortable. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But speaking of turning things off, there was a story in the London Times yesterday. They call it The Times. And I know it's older than the New York Times, but here in America, The Times is the New York Times, and they call their Times, I guess their Times is just The Times. We should probably work that out in the trade deal that Trump said the UK will be getting. So they're going to be the London Times, the New York Times will be The Times. Anyways,
I agree.
Yes, not Trump, but U.S. officials in the Trump administration warned British defense officials that if you are deemed to not be doing what you're told, you'll find that your missiles won't fly and your jets won't, or your missiles won't fire and your jets won't fly. This kind of flew under the radar. I mean, you saw it, I saw it. That's kind of a crazy threat to make, and I think personally one that kind of completely endangers the entire American defense industry, because if you can't trust your stuff's going to work, and it only, it's going to work whether or not Trump likes you, or it's dependent on whether or not Trump likes you or not, why would anyone ever buy an American weapon ever again? I mean, even if they never do it, the threat is enough to just kill everything. Also, it raises the question to me, and hopefully you have an answer to this. Do countries know that their weapons have, like, DRM in them? The American DRM, where they can just turn it off whenever they want? And if so, they're okay with accepting that? I guess American leadership has never been this 180 before, but thoughts?
Yeah, so we should mention that all of the sources in that article were unnamed. And the U.S. side of that equation was not government officials, but defense industry. So that could have been Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, stuff like that.
Were they? Oh, then they were British government officials.
Yes.
Okay, I had it flipped. You're right.
But so take that with a grain of salt. But this is one of those interesting articles where whether or not those exact words were said by those people, it raises a question about something that should already be a conversation. And we've seen just in the last couple weeks kind of this shift emerge, or this shift appear between the United States and Europe, where we are telling them, you have to spend more on defense, don't count on us. And we're seeing politicians in Europe say, got it, like message received, we're going to have to start building up our own domestic defense capabilities. So the idea that the next step in that progression would not be moving away from U.S. arms, like that clearly would be the move. Now, in terms of now that's not going to be something that happens tomorrow, and there's all of these contracts are long term. There's very few things in the defense industry where like you purchase a thing, you get a thing, and that's the end of it. There's a lot of long term maintenance contracts and deliveries over the course of years of platforms and things like that. So this isn't short term, but in terms of turning things off, it'd be interesting to see some of the more high-end platforms. I guess it wouldn't be crazy if things like the F-35, the U.S. has the ability to somehow do something with that. But a lot of others, like I'd find it hard to believe that the U.S. could prevent one of our tanks from rolling in Poland. Like or to prevent one of our HIMARS launchers that we sent to an ally from actually being able to launch the munition. Like, I don't think we have that degree of turning things off, but you don't necessarily have to, because all these pieces of equipment are incredibly maintenance heavy. They need a lot of changes. They need a lot of updates. And if we just slow rolled some of that stuff or just moved them down the list, said, hey, France, we don't like what you've been doing recently. We're just going to move you down the list a little bit. 8 other countries are going to get theirs before you. That's a significant issue for France's ability to defend themselves. So, maybe this conversation is genuine. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was taken out of context. But I'd be shocked if these conversations aren't being had all across Europe right now.
Without a doubt. And one of the things that's very odd to me about the demand that Europe spend more on defense is that it also seems to come along with, and I don't know if this is a J.D. Vance policy or if this is just a J.D. Vance policy and not a Donald Trump one, but it seems like they're also saying, well, you're going to also have to develop your own weapons. You can't necessarily buy American weapons because we may not sell them to you. That to me seems very weird, because it seems a boon for the United States would be, yeah, you need to spend 5% of your GDP, and we're going to give you a discount on our weapons, right? That's quite a boon to the American industry, right? So it's weird to me that it seems to come with, you need to spend more, but also you may not be able to buy our weapons. That's bizarre to me.
First off, I need to introduce you to a couple friends I have to babysit today. This is Hattie and this is Honey. I'm under strict instructions to keep an eye on them.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what they're doing there. I wonder if this isn't a case of we overplayed our hand a little bit and thought, tell Europe to increase defense spending, and we strong arm them, and they say, got it, we'll take double our order for next year. And maybe it wasn't a consideration that they would say, that is a little too threatening, we are going to turn internal. So I don't, maybe just they misunderstood the direction that Europe might take this.
That is a good theory. I could co-sign to that. But speaking of that, Germany is now full-fledged envisioning a Europe without America. Not very good. They're talking about a nuclear deterrent with France. They're looking at deploying nuclear mirages to Germany, like it's the Cold War. And then they're also investing a ton of money into their arms industry. And more broadly, the EU is looking at deploying tons of more money into the general defense industry. And they're trying to do so by cutting Hungary out, who is not a fan of that. But on that note, Germany says they are going to produce over 500,000 shells for Ukraine this year. So shout out. But Europe's arming. The question is, can they arm themselves fast enough?
I think we dropped the ball here over the last, probably decades. Definitely was probably some momentum after the Russian invasion in 22. Maybe it could have been leveraged after 14, but this is a good thing for Europe. I like seeing, with a resurgent Russia right now on the march, I like seeing Europe focus in on defense spending, standing up larger militaries and more cooperation between some of these European countries. I even like the idea that they're looking at this and saying, how can we do this if the United States is not involved? Now, the reason I say I think we dropped the ball is that would have been a really good exercise to run through. as a group of friends and saying, hey, we might be preoccupied in another part of the world. What can you guys get done, assuming that we cannot contribute hardly at all? That would have been a great war game. And I'm sure it's been done to some degree. And then Europe could have backfilled those capabilities. So in the event that the United States has to allocate 98% of our resources to the Pacific, we know that our long-standing friends in Europe are able to not only hold their own, but push back, an aggressor like Russia. So I like some of these moves. I'm disappointed in the way that they're having to come about, because I think we're at risk of kind of damaging those relationships rather than necessarily making all of us stronger together.
Agreed. Now, I will say this. If you zoom out 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and, the Vance speech in Munich is forgotten, I keep wanting to call him Tillerson. His name's not Tillerson. What the hell is his name?
It's Rubio.
Hegseth is who I'm talking about. No,
Hegseth.
I know Rubio. Because
So you're just throwing a random name out there.
Well, because Pete Hegseth looks like his name could be Rex, and I know that sounds like an insult, and maybe it is, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he just has Rex energy, and Rex Tillerson. Anyways, so
yeah,
if we zoom out 5-10 years and the wounds of these speeches and everything fade away, and the transatlantic alliance is still there, they didn't blow it up, but now Europe's very strong, and a war breaks out over Taiwan. Trump, the history books will write his strategy down as being successful. That Europe is strong now, and we took on China together, and we won. And maybe, but it'll be. I think the history books will look very favorably on him for that, if it works, I should say. But the question is, can you keep it together without blowing it up? I don't know. But speaking of blowing things up, the tariffs, we've talked about the tariffs before. We're not going to explain how tariffs work, but I have a question for you. We can make a bet here.
Okay.
Trump said with Macron that the tariffs are going into effect on April 1st. He had previously said that in January the tariffs are going into effect on February 1st. February 1st arrives. He says they're going into effect on March 1st. Now March 1st has arrived, and he says going on April 1st. And now I know Pierre Navarro said that they're actually going to go into effect on March 3rd, but I haven't seen Trump say that. He continues to say April 1st. Do you think the Canadian-Mexican tariffs go into effect on April 1st, or do you think somebody's going to come up again and he's going to move it back to May 1st?
Something's going to come up.
You think so? The tariffs,
Yeah.
they're always a month away. But he will be not threatening. Oh, I guess that too. He will be tariffing the EU 25%, and that is coming very soon. In my research for this, I tried to find a date he initially gave, but unlike Mexico and Canada, he has not given a date. It's coming very soon, and he's been saying that since he was inaugurated. And Europe is coming. They are bringing a AR-15 to a knife fight. They apparently have a list of thousands of American companies and goods that will be hit with tariffs immediately. They say they're targeting red states. Canada also took the same approach, and I'm very surprised.
Europe is targeting red states specifically.
Yeah, with their tariffs. Yeah,
That's really interesting. That's
Canada,
interesting when you think about it. That right, like, so. Wow, I didn't know that. Kind of mixed on that, honestly. I understand the idea of wanting to come after American goods, but that's a political part, right? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, Canada took the same approach during the 12-hour trade war. You remember when he was like, yeah, they're going into effect tomorrow, and then actually, just kidding. I'm very interested. So, to me, it implies that Europe and Canada seem to believe that our alliances inherently are already politicized, that our alliances are already subjected to polarization, and that the right, as it moves more towards isolationism, that their really only option is to pander to the left. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was my read on it.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because that I don't know, and maybe it's just that red states make more things and blue states have more services, but I'm not necessarily sure that's true because California is one of the largest agricultural exporters in the world.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking of, if we did this the other way around, it would be our country. We would borderline say that we're meddling in their politics, right? So
Hmm.
if you look at, I mean, we do that in a sense with sanctions, and I know that it's not fair to compare sanctions to tariffs, or I don't know, maybe that is actually closer than it sounds off the bat, but when we sanction certain like political parties or industries or individuals in different countries, it's kind of our way of saying like we actually prefer and support the ones that we're not sanctioning, and it feels like that in a sense, but I don't know. I'd be interested to see that list and how that actually breaks out because we don't really. I feel like there's very few like big U.S. exports that are exclusively red or blue states. Like there's got to be a lot of overlap there, right?
Well, I think Kentucky, not Kentucky, Tennessee, of course, you have bourbon, right?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
is Tennessee
Kentucky.
bourbon? Or is Kentucky?
Kentucky.
You're right.
Yeah.
Kentucky also apparently, and you have to correct me on this because I don't know. I don't go below the Mason-Dixon line. Uh, just, well, you don't know where that is? But I don't, typically I don't travel below. I don't, I used to say it was ideological, but the more I think about it, I've just never had a reason to go below it. And I really my entire life. I mean, I lived in Nevada and Arizona for a while. I went to Disneyland as a kid, but since then, I guess Washington D.C. and Virginia are below the Mason-Dixon line, so I guess I do go below it. Anyways, to things that matter, people. I saw Canada threaten this, and the EU is threatening it. They're going to tariff Kentucky peanut butter.
I didn't know
Have
that was a
you?
thing.
Have okay? I didn't either. To me, it's just yeah, you just get like Jiffy, the Jif or Skippy or like the store brand or whatever. Or have you ever? Is Kentucky peanut butter a thing? Do people eat this? I mean,
They must
who?
have a bunch of peanut farms in and around here. I don't know. I live in Tennessee. I don't live in Kentucky. But I
I
just
know
want
you
to
don't,
say,
but
like,
yeah.
I thought we were in Abu Dhabi and you were talking up that great American company that you wanted to do some work with.
Which
That
one?
great Tennessee company.
Oh yeah,
You were
I'm
so
not hating.
excited.
I'm not hating on it. I was just saying, as a matter of my visiting practices, I don't go below the Mason Dixon line.
My grandfather has a story where his dad, he grew up in Illinois,
Yeah.
and his dad's brother lived in Kentucky, and I think it was
Hmm.
actually like Western Kentucky, not the Eastern. East tends to be like more Appalachia. West Kentucky, West Tennessee tends to be like a little more Midwest of sorts. But so this would have been back in the 50s, I think it would have been. Yeah, in the
Hmm.
50s. When he came down to visit his uncle told him to remove the license plate off his car.
Really?
He said, if you're driving around this area and people see an out of state license plate, you could get yourself in some trouble. And he was just in like the hills of Kentucky in the 50s, and
That's
he had to remove his
crazy.
license plate to safely drive through there. I always thought that was pretty funny.
That's crazy. That's pretty nuts. Uh, yeah. No, my living in Pennsylvania, Appalachia's there, but never had an experience like that. Although I will say, the Appalachian Mountains, very weird place all around, no matter where it's at. Right? Uh, Kind of spooky. I mean, compared to the Rockies, at least. But are you? I should ask you this. I mean, you're currently serving in the military. Are you excited to go back to Afghanistan? Because Trump seemed to suggest that we will be reinvading Afghanistan. Maybe that's too. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth. But he said that we're going to take back Bagram Air Base and we're going to take our equipment and then we're going to leave. Uh, I, you give your
This is
thoughts and I'll give mine. Yeah.
this is one of those where I've dealt with the same issue with the Gaza stuff. By the way, did you see that crazy AI video of Gaza Lago or whatever?
Yeah. Trump Gaza. Yeah,
Whoa.
that was crazy. Yeah.
That was creepy. There were bearded belly dancers, like straight. It was great because like it had a mix of like pretty good AI, like to show how far it's come, and then the belly dancers had beards, and it was like, oh yeah, we're not quite there yet.
Dude, he had a Saddam-esque statue of himself, but it was made of gold in
Yeah,
that one. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That
So
to me was
all over the
bizarre.
map.
Yeah.
Um, but anyways, I will still have to make. There was a poll recently where something like 50% of Republicans were on board with the U.S. taking over Gaza,
Oh,
and 25% of Democrats. And both of those numbers, I was like, are you fucking kidding me right
that's
now?
way too
Like,
high.
I thought those would be like single digits. The idea that people were on board with like all of a sudden we'd have this presence in the Middle East, and I said something like, "This is boots on the ground. Like we would have to have boots on the ground." And people inevitably were like, "No, no, no. This would not be boots on the ground." Like, look, Hamas just held a funeral today with like a battalion's strength of armed fighters patrolling the streets of Gaza. Like, I don't know the scenario that we take Gaza and don't have some sort of military personnel there. And it's kind of the same with Bagram. Like, I feel like the same argument is coming where people are going to be like, well, we'll just buy it from the Taliban. It's like, but then we're surrounded by the Taliban and Islamic State in that part of the country. We have to have troops there. You can't just like, who's going to guard that? I guess you could really say maybe we're going to have some contractors or something, but like that is a hostile area. So even if we were to buy it and not invade Afghanistan to take Bagram back, I don't know. I don't think that's a realistic thing. It's not the Taliban are in a spot where they could use any sort of alleviation of sanctions, and they're still trying to get a grip on the world stage. So they're in a position to be bargained with, that's for sure. But you know, this is the mission creep. This is how mission creep happens. Like, we just need the airfield, but we need air traffic controllers, and we're going to need boots on the ground to guard the base. And then we probably need some helicopters, because you don't just want to be shooting the guys when they come up to the gate. You got to have a little standoff to make sure they don't get too close to the gate. And then probably some radars to protect from any sort of indirect fire. Next thing you know, you've got a brigade's worth of U.S. soldiers there dodging rockets. But yeah.
Without a doubt. Now, I should say there is a wrinkle, though, in Trump's plan here. I'm going to read you what he said, because to me, it sounds like we're re-entering to take Bagram, and then we're going to withdraw and do it properly, just kind of for the sake of it. So
Just to show them we can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to get up, and we're going to keep Bagram, not because of Afghanistan, but because of China, because it's exactly 1 hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons. So they were going to keep Bagram. We're going to keep a small force on Bagram. We're going to have Bagram Air Base, one of the biggest air bases in the world, one of the biggest runways, one of the most powerful runways, in the sense that it was very heavy, concrete and steel. You could carry about anything. You could land anything on those runways. We gave it up, and you know who's occupying it right now? China. Biden gave it up. So we're going to keep that. We're going to have a withdrawal, and we're going to take our equipment. We're going to do it properly. So it seems like we're not going to be there for a while. We're just going to take the airbase back, take back these old Humvees, and then come back. Still pretty nonsensical, but...
So he's saying that China I have no idea about this, but that means that China must manufacture all of their nuclear weapons in the extreme western portion of the country? That doesn't seem accurate.
No one even lives over there, right? I guess you have Xinjiang, but
why would... I mean, this is what I'm saying. Like, maybe they do, but it seems like, you know, the manufacture of nuclear weapons and that whole process takes a lot of industry. Mm-hmm. So it'd be surprising if they did all of that so far out. But I don't know, maybe.
He's totally... I mean, it's definitely
or
not
that just
an hour
thing.
away.
You think that was just a... Yeah, okay.
It's definitely not an hour away.
I've not heard anything about the Chinese taking over Bagram, for what it's worth. Could be true. News coming out of Afghanistan has been relatively sparse. The Taliban have done their thing and pretty well clamped down on any sort of media at all. Like, at all. To where, like, genuine news events can take a long time to come out of Afghanistan. A lot of cell towers in certain areas have been taken down. There's no, of course, like, free press is not even a consideration at this point. I do know some Chinese diplomats and citizens were targeted there by Islamic State a couple of years back, trying to push out any sort of Chinese presence. But I'm not sure they've taken over Kabul. There might be some civilian entity there, but I'm not aware of any military presence, for what it's worth.
So In my research for my job, I work in the news, had to write a story on this. The origin of China taking over Bagram Air Base is Trump, who said in September 2021 that China's going to take it, and then China issued a statement. They're like, that's not true. We're also not at Bagram. And then he continued to say it throughout this entire campaign. So it's just, one of those scenarios where Trump creates the information and says it's a fact, but I don't know. Anyways, moving eastward or westward, the Trump admin encouraged Israel to strike Hezbollah's leadership during the funeral of Nasrallah, and Israel decided against the move over fear of escalating. I have a few questions for you here, Preston. So number one, we were in Abu Dhabi when that happened. They buzzed the funeral, as you recall. My first question is, I know, Lebanon had a lot going on, but Nasrallah died, last year, at the beginning of the fall.
I think.
Yeah.
Kept that body on ice?
Yeah, do they put him on ice? Why is it happening so late? The other question is, do you think buzzing the funeral was good? I don't have an opinion one way or the other. This is the first time I've ever seen that kind of really happen. And my third question, what is going on in Lebanon of Hezbollah? Are these new leaders a threat? Are they back and kicking? Are they like a cockroach that just won't go away? Or is it kind of like Al-Qaeda where this thing's just dead, but it exists in some form or another?
All right, so I don't know the method of keeping a body on ice for that long, but we've seen this a couple other times as well. Hamas just recently held funerals for some of their fighters that were killed even longer ago, and I find it hard to believe there's industrial strength refrigeration morgues in Gaza operating to hide key leaders of Hamas for months on end. So I don't know, pretty nasty stuff. Probably some pretty gross smells coming from that. But anyways, the reason that they largely held off on these funerals throughout this war is it presents a pretty tempting target set. It shows a lot of people. Now, it's not generally going to be some large 2,000-pound bomb in the middle of a stadium filled with women and children, but you would expect to see a lot of senior leadership show up to that funeral, and it's going to pull them out of hiding. So it's not necessarily at the funeral there's going to be a big bomb on their heads, but it forces some of these guys out of the tunnels and out of hiding to show their faces all in one place, and then it opens up the door for them to be tracked back to where they came from or whatever it might be. So that's why we saw both Hamas and Hezbollah waiting on the funerals. The buzzing over, my understanding, those were the same aircraft used to drop the bombs that killed Nasrallah. So a little symbolism there.
All the same ones?
If not the exact same aircraft, it was the same unit that buzzed over. So it wasn't just a coincidence of we happen to have some jets. This was a very deliberate troll by Israel. I don't mind it one bit. Nasrallah was a terrorist. Hezbollah is a designated terrorist organization. They still exist. Buzz them all you want. I think that's just fine. I think it reiterated that Israel still has complete air dominance over Lebanon, which wasn't really ever in question, but a kind of a reminder right now, which gets to the third point of what the hell is going on with Hezbollah. The closest comparison that you brought up is probably the cockroach piece. The new leadership is pretty degraded. I mean, you got to think, if you've ever seen those charts of the Hezbollah leadership that's been killed, a lot of those guys have been fighting with Hezbollah since they were founded. A lot of them involved in some of the early fighting in the 80s, the bombing of the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. You can't remove that and replace it with somebody who's been in the organization 5 years and get the same thing out of it. So they took a thrashing, no doubt. A lot of their weapon systems found and destroyed, a lot of their tunnel networks blown up, and so on and so forth, pushed out of southern Lebanon. That said, they are still a political party. They still have leadership. They still have quite a few fighters. So a big question in Lebanon is going to be what happens in the south. Israel has kind of, depending how you look at it, my take would be we've not seen the Lebanese army effectively come in and reoccupy some of those Hezbollah positions, which means that they're just open for Hezbollah. So in turn, Israel has drugged their feet in coming out saying, hey, we can't just walk away or we're going to be right back in the same spot we were a couple of years ago. So that fighting has generally stopped. There's been the occasional Israeli airstrike in Lebanon. The fighting has stopped, but it's not been resolved because the resolution has to do with that kind of southern portion of Lebanon. And right now, Israel controls a big chunk of that. I don't think that's sustainable long term, but that's the only real solution right now.
So let me ask you this. It was a thought I had earlier today as I'm writing this video, my NATO video here. So jets, you said the jets are the same. Now, certainly to the people on the ground, they can't tell that. I mean, maybe they're better skilled spotters than I am, but they don't know that. And similarly, after 9/11, the U.S. flew B-2s straight from Missouri and to hit Afghanistan and then back. And then, of course, with the Iranian proxies, you saw the B-1s fly straight out of the United States, hit the Iranian proxies, and go back. Does any of this matter to these terror groups, or is this just something that we like to do in the West? Because to me, it's just, I think once you do it once, after that, it's just like, all right, who cares? Is it just more about sending a domestic message? Because surely everyone knows, they do this all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what I would refer to this as is a show of force, something we would do in the U.S. military in Iraq and Afghanistan, still do in Syria, where it's you bring in an aircraft and you fly them at an altitude, and they maybe click on the afterburners or whatever it might be over a specific point on the battlefield. So at times we might be getting shot at in Afghanistan, but we couldn't tell exactly where the shots were coming from. We just knew it was from like this group of buildings, so we weren't going to shoot back into it. And we would have a show of force where an A-10 would come down real low and kind of skim the top of the building, and it would send the signal to whoever's in there like, there's a big-ass fighter jet overhead looking at you. Because they just flew right at your position and peeled up. You couldn't miss it. So I think that's what you're seeing here is a show of force. It's whether it's to the leadership, the fighters on the ground, or the civilians that are supporting Hezbollah. We see you. We're right here. We saw the footage from the ground. They clearly saw and heard the fighters overhead. However, in this case, given that that's not really a secret, probably more of a message to the Israelis at this point that they're going to do something during a terrorist's funeral.
Interesting. So now I'm going to give you another one of my weird theories, and then we're going to pivot to more U.S.-centric news, although it's pretty worldwide news. Do you think there's something to be said about our leaders being just objectively speaking, good-looking? Because I was thinking a bit about this, and maybe your viewpoint's different because you are 40 years older than me. Yes. So at late stage Obama, we had Obama, good looking dude. Then we had Justin Trudeau, good looking. Emmanuel Macron, good looking. And then after that, all the good looking liberal internationalists kind of just fell off the face of the planet. And now we had old men with Trump and Biden, not good looking. And then I guess, Keir Starmer's back, and maybe that is a sign going forward, right? But Olaf Scholz, not a good-looking dude. So do you think there's something to be said here about our leaders being attractive that perhaps creates good conditions for governing? Because, and I think this isn't a new phenomenon. I think maybe this applies throughout all of human history. No one ever thought Hitler was hot. No one was saying that, right? But people have a good memory of JFK's time, right? And everyone thinks JFK is like the hot president, right? So what do you think about this? Do you think there's something here, or do you think this is just coincidence and that there are a lot of ugly presidents who were good?
Isn't there, I think there's, maybe I'm making this up entirely. I thought there have been studies about how good-looking people are like immediately viewed as more trustworthy. Am I making that up? That's the only thing I would point to is I feel like no matter how you feel about it, we react to attractiveness a certain way, and there's probably a value in that. For some reason, I'm going to that trustworthiness. I don't know if it's true or not, but there's got to be something there, right? When you see somebody and they're attractive, do you immediately trust or distrust a little bit more than if they weren't? So in that sense, I think it would matter. But are you suggesting that we should prioritize that or deprioritize that?
Yeah, I think if you're an uggo, stay away from the Oval Office.
Stay away. Okay.
But however, I do agree with you. But Gavin Newsom, I think, I mean, I don't know the female gaze, but to me, he seems objectively attractive. Yet I look at him and I think this man is a used car salesman. Do you get the same vibe there? I mean, does that kind of not break the theory?
If I'm being honest, I haven't been paying too much attention to the attractiveness scale of our politicians.
That's
so
fair.
I can't. I'd
John
be
Thune, though.
looking
Yeah.
back at it now and trying to apply that, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be genuine. I think is the best way to put it.
Very true. Anyway, speaking of attractive people, Peter Navarro, Trump's trade czar, has threatened to redraw the Canadian border. Preston, you're very much against the annexation and invasion of Canada.
I am. I'm
Tell
drawing
us
that
why
line.
you think this is a bad idea.
The invasion of Why I think the invasion of Canada is a bad idea.
Well, the redrawing of the border, which I guess is essentially an invasion, isn't it? So
That feels very Russian, doesn't it? Like we're not going to
does.
invade. We're just going to change the internationally recognized borders in our favor. I don't know that there's much support for that in the United States or in Canada. I think is probably the simplest place to go on that one. I haven't seen any people too much in favor of redrawing the border, starting any sort of war with our northern brethren. Everything that I've seen, even though it doesn't appear to have escalated in recent weeks, is that we pissed off the Canadians quite a bit, and I'm not exactly sure why or what we got out of it.
Well, I mean, it upset the Democrats, so I mean, I guess you got that out of it, right? But before we get into the Epstein thing, talking about the White House, I mean, that has lit the world on fire. Let's talk about this really quick. Trump plans to sign an executive order to make English the official language of the United States. I don't know if he can do that via executive order. What are your thoughts?
On the surface, I don't think that I really have an issue with that. What does that really do? I mean, most of our stuff is already in English. The primary language across the country is. What would that materially do day in and day out, other than just having it on the book somewhere?
So I think it's a signaling thing. I also think it creates a preference in how the government releases information. So right now we don't have an official language, so it's in just everything, right? And so by making official language, you can make it to where perhaps, it only comes out in English, but none of the other languages. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's weird symbolism. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I don't know. I think it just ignores the complexities of who we are and who we might become, and I think it draws the circle of belonging too small. So, not a fan of it, although, I mean, it's not the end of the world. I don't know. I kind of like that we don't have an official language.
I'm going to say this is not the kind of thing to spend time, energy, or capital on, because a lot of countries around the world have official languages. I think you and I were just in one. I imagine there's an official language of the United Arab Emirates, but there's a shitload of English there, and I'm certain that's not the official language. I guess technically it could open the door to some form of discrimination, but all those doors are already open today. If somebody doesn't want to put something in Spanish, they don't. If they do want to put it in Spanish, they do. I don't know. To me, it doesn't seem like anything would drastically change there. So I'd rather spend my time arguing about Epstein files that I know nothing about.
Absolutely. You know what language move I could get behind, though? If Trump signed an executive order saying it's not called English anymore, it's called American, I would
They would
back
sever
it.
those cables, man.
Yeah.
They would put up a wall.
Oh, they'd be fuming. I think it'd be the funniest thing he's ever done. So for that reason, I support it. And if there's anyone we could do this to, it's the Brits. I mean, that's our best friend, right? But the Epstein files. Jeffrey Epstein, everyone knows who he is at this point. He was arrested several times. He died in 2019 via suicide. And now the files are being released by him. And people are upset because, there's a lot of obfuscation. There's a lot of, misdirection. People are thinking they've been robbed. People are finding out that they created perhaps a big zeitgeist around Jeffrey Epstein that it's just – don't want to say it's not true. I think they just overhyped it, only to find out that we know everything about him. But there have been influencers tied up in this. And so, Preston, our White House correspondent, what happened here? What happened here? People are angry. I'm seeing Brett Cooper get into the mud. I'm seeing – Ben Shapiro staying out of it, but I'm seeing a lot of people get down and dirty here fighting. We have a MAGA civil war, as Glenn Beck put it. What happened here?
All right, so the reason that Ben and I thought this would be worth diving into is because both Ben and I have been fortunate enough to be at the White House within the last couple of years around this type of work that we do. So we thought maybe we shed a little light on that or our experience there and maybe how that ties in. So look, the Epstein files is not like on my top 100 things that I'm keeping up with, but from my understanding, it looks like they released some binders to some conservative influencers, and they came out and took some pictures with them, smiling, and turned out there wasn't really anything in the binders that wasn't already public information, and kind of looks like a trick. I think something flying under the radar right now is that the Department of Justice posted a link to the files, and it ended up being like a YouTube video of a Rickroll or something that was not.
Yeah, that was the House Judiciary Committee, the Republican.
Yeah,
House
that seemed.
Yeah, that was.
So there's
that
a lot
was
of
really
pushback
cool.
that there's two things. One is that they're not taking it seriously, that this is a serious thing. But the other is the influencers are catching a lot of heat from across the spectrum, I should say, because they were all touting, transparency and new media, and then this does not appear to be very transparent. It doesn't appear to be any sort of media that wasn't already out a couple years ago. So I thought that was worth getting into a little bit, Ben. What were your thoughts seeing all this?
So I
You're
watched.
grinning.
Yeah, because I watched DC Drano's video. I'm not really familiar with him. He's one of those people I've muted, just because they don't provide anything of value, at least to me. And I'm just being a hater today. Maybe I'm always a hater. The viewers will have to let us know, or the listeners.
Maybe they're not
but
attractive enough for you. Is that what I'm getting?
maybe he's not hot enough for me. But he made this video where he said, yeah, so we went into the Roosevelt room, and then we met Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. And then J.D. Vance was there, and he spoke to us. And then Trump invited us into the Oval Office, so we got to be there, President Trump. But then we met the NSA director and the CIA director and this other defense official. And then we went to this other room next to the Oval Office, and we met Marco Rubio and the Treasury Secretary, Pete Hegseth. And then he just kind of listed off a few more officials that he met. And I just thought, does no one work in this administration? Do they all just hang out in the White House? And then, what is going on? Why are they all just hanging out around the White House? It wasn't like there was a cabinet meeting today. So very bizarre. All just hanging out around the White House, seemingly not really doing anything. So what he described is that they were just sitting there hanging out. And maybe Trump likes to, he just wants his buddies around him to hang out all day. But kind of a weird scenario, the way the guy was describing it. When we were at the White House, Preston, we met Admiral Kirby, and he spoke to us for a little bit in the Eisenhower Executive Room, our building. And we were not allowed upstairs in the White House. And we weren't even allowed to take pictures. But
we did the public White House tour. That was
they did.
I actually in retrospect, I'm happy with how it turned out. I remember, so Ben and I were both there with NATO.
Yes.
For what it's worth. So the White House, the Biden administration has done some degree of influencer type stuff in the past. I've never been part of that, invited that or anything like that. So Ben and I were there with NATO. So as a part of the NATO summit in D.C., one morning they blocked off, let's go over, you'll do a quick White House tour and meet Admiral Kirby and see the press room at the White House. So the entire thing, of course, with Admiral Kirby was private and off to the side. We got to ask him some questions, filmed start to finish. I think people had their cameras rolling the entire time. But in the White House, we actually did the public tour. So it was this group of influencers, if you will, and then just a handful of other people that were in our group with their kids that were in D.C. for the day. So yeah, didn't get the meeting with 19 top officials. It was, but that is kind of funny because they all work in different places in even I think it's kind of odd that they're all in DC at baseline. Maybe it's the cabinet meeting the day prior, but not just in DC, but that they're all in the White House at the same time is weird. They all have their own individual buildings and departments that are not right across the street. They are scattered all across DC. To all be in the White House at the same time is kind of funny.
It's like it's friends, or they're all just in the same apartment.
Yeah.
Oh, what is going on here? They gave us the public White House tour, and they packaged it like we're getting something very special. I mean, we did get to go into the Eisenhower executive room and speak to Admiral Kirby. Very grateful for that.
Yeah.
But I totally, yeah, you're right. It was the public White House tour. For some reason,
But in retrospect,
yeah.
in retrospect, I'm happy that's how it played out because there's so much distrust right now of, and has been. It was the case when we were there of people being fed narratives and like this is what you have to say or what you should say or talking points that anytime I've gone on any of these trips or been involved with anything, my hackles are always up. Like, is there going to be pushback? Is there going to be, hey, here's the 5 things we'd like you to highlight even? And in my experience, that hasn't been the case. I can't speak to everything, but I don't know.
No, yeah, NATO.
I can't speak to the ones I haven't been to, I guess is what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, I was never on any of those influencer trips where you were with Biden. I did see the influencers they're at the Christmas party, and I saw a few of my buddies there taking photos of Hunter Biden. Hilarious. I don't know why he was there, but he was, so I guess get the picture. But yeah, no, it was never there. But yeah, these right-wing influencers kind of, people are very upset with them. I also think, more generally, like I said, is that they created this myth around Jeffrey Epstein, that there was more there than anyone ever thought, and it was being withheld from people. But, it seems like what we know is actually what we know. Now, it'll be interesting if in phase 2, they release the list, because we do know Donald Trump, the president, is on the Epstein flight logs. He's on the list. I'm not saying he's committed any crimes while he was there. He was great friends with Jeffrey Epstein. So the big thing will be, like, do they remove him from the list? Like, I don't know. So that's kind of like the big thing that hangs over everyone's mind here. Ultimately, though, in my opinion, I don't think the list matters. I don't care about the list. It's all kind of caught up in this. Generally, people believing there's a larger conspiracy at play. And I'm not about it. I don't rock with it, Preston.
Not moving there? All right, I like it. Well,
Yeah,
I think that's probably a place we can wrap for today then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to wrap. We talked about a lot of things, the need for a good heel leader, hot leaders versus ugly leaders, in America being so back, at least for right now. So the title of this is going to be We're So Back. But if you're watching this and actually this press conference that happens in 2 hours from now blows up, well, we didn't know.
No, we're not.
We didn't know.
We're
we'll be
not,
back on Monday, and we're going to say, oh, it's so over.
We'll walk back everything we said, yeah.
We're on the Trumper coaster, dude. We're on the Trump coaster, and we're going up and down. We're going all over, doing loop-de-loops you wouldn't even imagine. But subscribe on YouTube, like, comment on Spotify, vote in our polls, follow us, give us 5 stars. On Apple Podcasts, the very few of you that are over there, you're like a small tribe. We never speak to you because really Apple doesn't have any tools to allow us to do so. But
we would if we could.
We would if we could. You're welcome to change over the better platforms like YouTube and Spotify. But we will see you next week. Maybe Monday, maybe Friday. Who's to say? No one knows except the president. So we will talk to you next week.